A very good afternoon to our esteemed guests, professors, scholars, and students. Welcome to another wonderful session. It is indeed a golden opportunity for each one of us to enrich and enlighten ours also. Without further ado, let us dive into our promising schedule. Let me call upon our English Literary Association Secretary, Dr. C.K. Uma Devi ma'am, to deliver the welcome address.
A very good afternoon to everyone joining us today. I am very happy to say that we have successfully completed our morning session with Dr. Tamimul Ansari sir and also the paper presentation session in 9 panels with 9 chairpersons from various other institutions. Now we are entering into the next session, that is the second session of this wonderful event. I deemed it a great pleasure to introduce you Mr. Mohammad Sedick Chrombe, an eminent person and an excellent academician from the land of South Africa, who has accepted our invitation amidst his busy schedule and given his consent to be our resource person on this auspicious occasion. He has involved in education and training for more than 25 years. He is an excellent lecturer, trainer, mentor, coach, administrator, consultant, and facilitator. He has completed his BA in Industrial Psychology and Sociology, a diploma in Public Administration, a master's degree in Public Administration, and a higher diploma in Education from the University of Western Cape. Then he continued his studies at the Italian School for Foreigners in Italian language and culture and completed certificate in beginner's Italian, certificate in advanced Italian, certificate in basic mediation skills, and certificate in advanced mediation skills. He worked as a banker in Nedbank, South Africa, a secondary school teacher and head of the department in Strand Secondary School, Western Cape Education Department, a lecturer in Peninsula Technikon, Cape Town, a lecturer in IMM, International Graduate School of Marketing, Stellenbosch, Western Cape, a trainer and facilitator in West Cape Education Department, Western Cape Province, and also in Shantuka Small Business Development Center, Cape Town. He served as a director in the board of directors for Elgin Learning Foundation, a director in the board of directors for Belgis Training Center, and also a director in the board of directors of the Voice of the Cape radio station. Moreover, he served as a chairperson of board of directors in ICRA Learning Center, a chairperson of Poland Technical College Board of Directors, a chairperson of Strand Technical College Board, a chairperson of Strand Jetty Board of Trust, a director in Tukor Private Limited Tourist Company, and a member of Helderberg Hospice Board of Directors. He has published 2 books. His Apartheid Diary is a book on the experiences of a person classified as colored in South Africa. His next book, titled South African Rugby Untold Stories from the Divided Nation, is a book which relays the trials, tribulations, and sacrifices of former non-racial sporting greats. He has published many articles, booklets, and newsletters too. He worked in different countries like Mozambique, Egypt, Algeria, Russia, and Namibia. At present, he is working as a lecturer, trainer and coach, administrator, and consultant. He is such an expertise in all the fields. Now, on behalf of our Department of English, I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you and good morning.
Dr. Sir, we are very lucky to have you as our resource person today. For that, we thank Dr. Tamimul Ansari sir for the bottom of our heart. Sir, now we are eagerly expecting to hear more from you about Global South literature and theory. I assure all the participants of this program that this conference will prove to be fruitful and informative for all the members participating in the conference. On behalf of our college, once again, I extend a hearty welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very long and tedious introduction. I was actually listening to you and I didn't realize it was me. But thank you for the kind words that you have extended to me and the invitation that has been extended. I hope I will be able to vindicate the confidence, the confidence that you have instilled in me, and give credence to the platform. Thank you very much. I think I'll start off and do the presentation, which is the following presentation. Okay. Once again, good morning to everybody. My topic obviously is within the theme that you have forwarded to me, which covers borders, bodies, and belongings. The global South. Obviously, I hail from the global South, and my topic will basically cover, or my presentation will cover, three areas. The global South obviously is a term that was coined by Charles Ogilvy in 1969. And what I'm trying to convey here is three levels. Firstly, I want to look at what this terminology and other terminology entails and means for us in the global South. And also to ensure that I bring into the context how these terminologies, basically words, terminologies, and the connotations that they have for us as the global South. I will also just touch on what the global South is and where the predetermined boundaries of the global South and how that plays itself up in geopolitical affairs of the world. So, and then lastly, I think I've been told by Dr. Ansari that I must focus on the literature that I've written. And if you just looked on my left shoulder and probably on your right side, you will see at the background, that's one of the books that I have written. So firstly, once again, I want to reiterate that the term was coined by Charles Ogilvy in 1969. And beside the term global South, which I'll basically give a sense of where it is situated, we also have other terminologies like underdeveloped world, the third world, the developing countries, and so forth. And these different terminologies have different connotations. And usually the connotations which it has brings with it certain effects. And these effects, which the terminologies basically brings for us, it stigmatizes. And if we look at the global South, you will see the stigmatization that it has. It has a number of characteristics. Global South means a number of things to the world order and the geopolitical order of this globe. So what we understand here is that the global North also has a stigmatization, but it is much more in a positive sense, whereas that of the global South is much more in a negative sense, because it sets for a certain parameters which allows unfair practices from those in the global North and powerful continents to basically exert their power over the global South. And when we talk about the global South, which I've also alluded previously, it denotes a negativity. It denotes a kind of paternalism and a parochialism, which is also classified as narrow-mindedness. And when we talk about all those negative connotations of the global South that is attributed to the global South, people basically then from the global North look, and their thoughts and their ideas are basically informed and infused by all this negativity. That is why sometimes when people from the global South countries visit the global North, they are obviously under greater scrutiny. And this is how this stigmatization, parochialism, and negativity plays itself out. And the global South is always at the backdrop, despite the fact that the global South is basically quite wealthy in natural resources, and the global South is quite wealthy in ideas and different methodologies. So who is this global South? And it's not necessarily defined by a geographical location. It is rather defined by wealth, quality of life, standard of living, and more other criteria. And who basically determines these criteria? These criteria are determined by those in the global north and in the wealthier. And just to give an idea why I say this, if we look at international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, over the years, it has basically always had a European as its head, whereas the World Bank, another international where countries can apply for international loans, similarly to the IMF, it is usually American that leads it. And just after World War II in 1944, a, a conference was held to basically build the world economy. The global economy was in tatters. And it was ravaged, Europe was ravaged by the war. And what transpired was that these powerful countries came together and they basically started creating institutions like the League of Nations, which later became the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and a whole host, the World Health Organization, and a whole host of other organizations which were going to ensure that global affairs were going to be managed to the benefit of all. And that was basically how the global south and the global north eventually sprouted from. And we will find that when we talk about the global south, we basically talk mostly about countries in Africa, South America, Asia, and the Caribbean. But what is interesting is, despite the fact that some of the countries are geographically located in the global south or in the global north, they are basically part of the global north. And here we see Japan, because if you look at the category above, where it talks about wealth, quality of life, and standard of living, then Japan doesn't fall into that. Similarly, Singapore, Israel, despite being centrally located in the Middle East, is not part of them. We can also look at countries such as French Guiana, is another country which is in South America. And that country is also not seen as one of the global south countries. So I've already said that despite the fact that the global south is blessed with vast natural resources, it's still regarded as poor, it's still regarded as a low quality of life, and that the standard of living of the people are very low. So this is just a map to basically give us an indication of where the global south countries are the ones more in the darker gray color. And you will find that certain countries, for instance, in Asia, Mongolia is still part of, and South Korea, they are part of the, North Korea rather, they are part of the global north. Whereas we find countries like Australia and New Zealand are part of the global south. Part of the global north, despite them geographically located in the global south. So this is just a personal observation. If we look at the global south and the global north, one can immediately see that it is basically based on polarization of countries, but it is based on race. Because if you look at most of the countries that are regarded as rich and in the global north, are countries which are basically inhabited by Caucasians or white people, whereas the countries in the global south are mostly inhabited by those that are from a darker hue, people that are black and brown peoples. And that basically, to my mind, if I basically detract from that, and if I assume from that, then I can see it's based on racism. And this is one of the key factors why the world is still so much polarized on the basis of race. The global south concept, as well as the global north concept, through literature, are basically it is basically continuing in a different guise. It's through the use of words, terminologies like inferiority, underdevelopment, and it is seen that the global south always are in need of regular assistance and aid, that the global south can never basically survive without aid from so that is where I actually mentioned earlier a sense of paternalism that the global south needs to be looked after, that the global south cannot stand on its own feet, and that there is great poverty stricken and greater literacy, which actually translates into different visions of the global south. We usually see when we watch the mainstream media, when that Africa is being depicted, it is people living in huts. It is children that wear tattered clothing. It usually is depicted as a country where wild animals roam. Not that there are not wild animals in Africa, but that is not what Africa is all about. Africa has got modern cities, it's got high-rise buildings, and it's got good infrastructure. It's got some of very good harbors, railway networks, etc. It's also got some very electronic connectivity. But when the media basically or the literature are written about Africa, it usually depicts it as backward, and the terminologies that are being used are the dark continent. And what does the dark continent mean? The dark continent obviously means that it is underdeveloped, that it is still backward, and that it is in need of great help to bring them out of the darkness into the light, into development. But sometimes we overanalyze these issues. We sometimes believe that we need to put it out there, and it sometimes seems like these kind of issues then are being sown as a need. We ourselves probably embed the ideas that we as Africans need help, and that is not like that, because what we have found, for instance, in the Sahel countries in Africa, there are three countries that have now actually decided to throw off the weight of the colonialist order. They were Francophone countries. Francophone countries are usually countries that were under the colonial auspices and power of France. And these countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. These three countries have now decided that they don't need the colonial order to tell them how to run their affairs, and they can stand on their own feet. It did not go down well. They're trying to basically eradicate the yoke of oppression, which is now not colonialism per se, but a new form of colonialism, and which we call neo-colonialism. And neo-colonialism is basically continue to be embedded through the media and through the entertainment industry. But I want to bring it closer to home. I want to bring it closer to South Africa. And in South Africa, for instance, we had a history and a legacy of colonialism. But even before colonialism, we had a history of slavery, where slaves were basically captured, brought from the south coast of, brought as we had political exiles that were actually captured, that fought against the Dutch in Java and Sumatra. They were brought to South Africa. Slaves were captured also in that area, as well as in India, on the south coast of India. Indentured laborers were also brought from India to the east coast of South Africa. And that is part of our legacy of colonialism, slavery, and apartheid. Apartheid was a system, a political system that was based on race. And I myself personally has been living under the system for a greater part of my life. And later on, I will basically elucidate, and I will basically give an indication of my writings on why I believe that this part, apartheid, has actually been the most devastating. Not that slavery and colonialism has not been devastating, but I can confidently say that having lived under apartheid, I'm much more confident and I'm much more informed to speak about a political system that has basically taken our potential away, and basically has relegated us to second-class citizens in the country of our birth. In South Africa, in apartheid, it was a system of oppression and subjugation. And the legacy of that subjugation and oppression is still very much prevalent if we go around South Africa. And it is the system of apartheid was a system that was based on race. And this system that was based on race, unfortunately, put the white race group at the top and what we call the black race group, which made up 80% of the population, or maybe even 92 if we basically take all the others that counted into the black population group. The black population group was the African group, the different tribes. It was the people of mixed race, and it was the people that came from India as traders and indentured laborers. These people basically made up 92% of the population. But under apartheid, the minority population, which just made up 8% of the population, basically subjugated the 92% through military means and through security services. And they basically subjugated the 92% violently. And different laws were enacted to ensure that these people are kept in bondage. And I will look at some of the legislation pieces later on as well when I talk about the book. Right? Sorry about what happened here to the slides. I see that it might have overrun here. I don't know how that happened. But we will find in South Africa today, because of the legacy of apartheid, that 76% of land still belongs to the minority white race group, while 82% of the population sits with the other 24%. And that skewed legacy of yesteryear still continues unabatedly today. It is embedded in the South African economy and in the South African political system. And obviously, this actually leads to a lot of enmity. It leads to a lot of conflict still, and it plays itself out politically in South Africa as well. But in 2015 and in there were two movements to try and basically eradicate society from the decolonialization, or to rather to decolonize the society from a number of legacies of the past which apartheid, slavery, and colonialism brought. And the students at different universities came into uproar, and they had marches, and they basically requested through the two movements called Rhodes Must Fall, and the other one, Fees Must Fall. Rhodes Must Fall was basically a movement which came about where students basically called for the statues of former colonialists and apartheid relics, leaders of apartheid, to be removed. That certain names of institutions, certain names of streets and different other avenues, that they be removed because it was a reminder of oppression and subjugation. Now, the Rhodes Must Fall is basically, it basically alludes to Cecil John Rhodes. Cecil John Rhodes was an arch colonialism that came here to South Africa from England, and he tried to basically conquer the Western Cape, the province which I live from, Cape Town, that he wanted to conquer this province for the crown. But Cecil John Rhodes even went further. When the natural resources was excavated, the diamonds and the gold, Cecil John Rhodes set up a number of companies to basically corner these minerals for the British crown. And in South Africa, the establishment of Anglo-American, which was a British company together with American interests, to basically corner the South African mineral wealth. And I can confidently say that South Africa is quite a wealthy country, and it can easily look after its population fairly well. But unfortunately, due to the embedded colonialist order that still remain, where despite the fact that we are politically a democracy, we still tend to find that our economy is still remaining in the hands of the white and colonial authorities. And these authorities obviously sits in boardrooms in Western capitals, and they are still behold the government of South Africa, despite being a democratic government and a progressive government, they still beholden to these boardrooms in Western countries. So just to go back again to the literature, is that we find that South Africa has what we call a lot of stereotypes that emanates from our past. We still have a lot of bias, which are conscious and unconscious, which basically we all have bias, but it's when we act on it. And sometimes we in South Africa do find that on a micro level, it plays itself out because of that legacy of racism which we had from the past. And when I talk about the powerful elites in South Africa, that also alludes to some of those sitting in boardrooms in the Western countries or in Europe. And that's I will probably basically try to point out where it came from when I touch on my book, which will probably be the third part of my presentation. I think the question uppermost, I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened here, but it seems to be getting out of context, the writing. It wasn't like that early on. But anyway, so what can we do? One of the questions that I've also said to myself, we can overanalyze what the problems are. But what can we do as people that come from a legacy of oppression and subjugation? And one of the questions which are uppermost is, how can we counter the measures that are that are continuing the prevalent inequalities in our country and in the global South? And I think one of the things that I embarked upon was to relay and convey our own stories. Because what we sometimes find, and I'm alluding to my book, which I wrote, my book's name is My Apartheid Diary. And it is here at the back of me. And what we basically need to do, and I cover the areas which I have dealt with, like slavery, colonialism, in the book as well, and how it played itself out in my country, South Africa. Under slavery, people were brought as slaves from India and Madagascar and Tanzania, from the west coast of, from the east coast of Africa. And as they came around the Cape, sometimes the boats would be stranded because Cape Town had some stormy weather, and it was initially called the Cape of Storms. And then these people would be left on the shores, and that is how they were captured. And some of them were brought, or some of them were just when the boats docked at Cape Town Harbor, they would unload them and they would sell them to some of the settlers which had farms. And some of the settlers came from the Netherlands, or they were called Dutch. And this is how we cover slavery. When we talk about colonialism in the book, South Africa had two colonial authorities, the one being first the Dutch, and then thereafter the British. And then when the minerals was basically found, we basically had the Dutch again fighting with and eventually the Dutch and the British had some sort of an agreement, and South Africa remained under colonial authority of the Dutch, but still with it influenced by the British. So these are the kinds of stories that we relay. And then obviously apartheid. Apartheid, I thought I needed to basically relay my lived experience and that of my families, my community, and our society, and what that meant for us, and how that influenced and basically impacted on our lives. It was a brutal system. Although people said we must now move on and forgive, we should not forget, because some of the things that were done have not really been completely dealt with, despite the fact that we in South Africa had what we call a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But the one flaw in that commission were people that committed atrocities under apartheid. The platform was created where they had to come forward and present. They weren't summoned. They were basically voluntary request, and it was done under the chairpersonship of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. But in later years, there was criticism, especially from the majority community, to say it didn't go far enough, because a lot of the perpetrators of the violent atrocities that was committed under apartheid has never been brought to book. And some of them have moved on into cozy jobs, and some of them have passed on without actually relating what the atrocities were. Sorry. And I said to myself that we need to write our own stories. I think it was Chinua Achebe who said, that said, until the lions write their own stories, the history of the hunt will always favor the hunter. Obviously, meaning if we don't write ourselves, somebody else will write for us. And that somebody else will probably write it from his perspective and context. And if it is somebody that comes from the continued or the community that still basically is rewarded from the system of a past beneficiation, that person will basically sanitize your version, and that person will basically make that story more palatable for you. So many times our people have been loath. Our people have basically been hesitant to write these stories. There are obviously a lot of gatekeepers. There are obviously a lot of impediments in your way. But nevertheless, you must just persevere and continue writing your own story. And it can also be done through film, our stories, our writings, nowadays social media. There are many platforms that we can use, books, articles, and more. Or we can basically establish societies and organizations that focus on the issues which are experienced by different groups, communities, etc. Or we can even lobby those in authority. And then I decided to follow my own advice and basically wrote the book My Apartheid Diary in 2020, as I alluded earlier, to depict our lived experiences under apartheid. But unfortunately, COVID had an impact on it, and it had to be held back for some time, because obviously you all know we couldn't have any personal interaction with anybody outside your family per se. So what happened was that I just persevered, and thanks to the Almighty, it has been quite fairly successful. I've sold quite a number of, and it's mostly at the one outlet only that I supply. It's called the District 6 Museum, and this museum basically talks about District 6. It was a estate in the heart of Cape Town, and it is internationally known, where the majority of Cape Towns living in the center of Cape Town was basically uprooted. And those people were majority people of color. And it is still a scar and a site at the foot of Table Mountain being another wonder of the world. And it is still something which have not been redeemed. People have not been allowed, because the whole neighborhood was flattened. And then obviously I found this regular distributor, which was the museum. So basically just a short synopsis of the one book. This is what the book looks like. And on the picture of that book, you will also find that there's a picture of what we call forced removals. But even before I get to that, I just need to basically say what apartheid basically was about. Apartheid, in the book I cover, apartheid is basically a system that was based on race. And basically, the system on race basically depicted the 4 different races in South Africa. They were categorized into white people at the top, black people, which included African, indigenous people, as well as so-called people of mixed race, and people that were regarded as Indian and Asian. Those were the 4. The white people basically had all the benefits. And how was it done? In the book I relate, it was done through legislation. It was done through a political system. And sometimes it might sound farcical when you relate to people, but different legislation were enacted by the apartheid government. And the first piece of legislation was called the Group Areas Act, dividing the population into different races. Then there was also the act called the Separate Amenities Act, and this might sound laughable and farcical, but everything in South Africa, all amenities was basically separated. Our housing areas, there was a housing area for white people, there was a housing area for Indian people, there was a housing area for colored people, mixed race people, and there was one for African. A white person could not live in any of that, nor can a person of those races reside in a white area. Colored people could not reside in an Indian area. Indian people could not reside in a black African area. There were total separation. And if you basically transgressed and you entered those areas, you could be arrested and you would be deemed somebody with a criminal record. And that, unfortunately, was what the Group Areas Act basically did to us. The Separate Amenities Act. Then there was also what we call the Mixed Marriages Act. The Mixed Marriages Act basically said that you cannot marry somebody from another race. It would be deemed a crime and it would be deemed criminal. You couldn't, for instance, play sport with another race. That would be deemed a crime and you would be deemed a criminal. And I can go on, and it, like I said, it might sound farcical. And on the picture of the book, you will find there's a bulldozer bulldozing some houses. And what that translates into is the Group Areas Act was the one which did forced removals. So in my family, we lived in the center of town. And in 1965, the authorities came, delivered a letter to the people of the town, telling them this area has now been declared a white area, which means that you all have to pack up and leave. While it was done maybe a year ahead, giving them letters to remove themselves from the CBD, people obviously had nowhere else to go, so they had to wait. But what the government of apartheid did, they created what is today called townships and locations. And these townships and locations were basically settlements. It was barracks. It was regimented houses standing next to each other. And on one specific day, the bulldozers just moved in, took people's belongings out, and told them you have now to move to the townships or to the locations. People had no right of recourse. They couldn't take the government to court because the government was the one that made the laws and they transgressed the laws. And although people might have lived there for 3-4 generations, they were forcibly removed and they were basically dumped in an area which was underdeveloped. And then when I mentioned earlier on where I said that the white population group sits with 76% of the wealth and the legacy of apartheid still is with us, it was as a result of all of these things that people a lot of old people who have lived there for 70, 80 years. They were basically heartbroken. Some of them died from old age, but many also died from a broken heart because of this forced removal and uprootment. And there was very little that they could do to this powerful security machinery of the apartheid order. And I've neglected, obviously, to put some pictures in. I think I maybe have the wrong presentation slides, but nevertheless, I'll just allude to that. The apartheid order was brutal. It basically didn't allow any resistance, protest, marches. And if anybody would probably try to basically protest or do something, you'd easily be picked up in the middle of the night. There were laws that were called the 30-day detention, 60-day detention, and 90-day detention, and you could be held there, never to be heard of again. So people were basically subjugated, they were coerced, they were brutally suppressed. And many times I believe that the full story of the apartheid order, despite the fact that we have now moved on and tried to reconcile, we should not forget our past, because the past basically informs our present and it will continue to influence our future. And this is the life that we lived under apartheid. But not only was apartheid basically allowing for you, dictating where you can go to school. Once again, just like the neighborhoods that were based on race, the schools were also based on race. You had schools for African black pupils, which basically was subsidized to a minimal by government. Why did government do that? Government did that to ensure a steady stream of uneducated, illiterate labor that could do the menial work. The colored population basically were also deprived, despite them having a little bit more resources than the black population and the Indian population. So what the government did is they did a system of subjugation on the basis of different degree, so that the colored would say, I'm a little bit better off than the black, and the Indian would say, I'm a little bit better off than the colored, but without taking notice that the white is the getting the most benefits. Then also everything was basically divided on race, even sport. And there are so many stories on sport, and that is my next book, which I basically will probably publish by the end of the year. That having been involved myself in sport for a while, having played this game as well, which might not be internationally renowned throughout all the countries of the world, but a great number, because this is part of the colonial legacy of South Africa, that the sports we play are all part of the sports that was brought here by the British occupation or the British colonialists. So it's a rugby, cricket, football, or soccer. These are the kinds of sports that South Africa practice. But when we talk about rugby, there was a great number of people from the disadvantaged community that played the sport and sacrificed a lot, but their stories are not being related. And their stories are captured in this book, where I basically interviewed 45 of these former sports stars, and where the stories are basically encapsulated in a socio-political and economic context. And the stories basically centers around how apartheid basically influenced their lives, how it took off their talents, how it took off their capacities, and how they were basically ignored to present South Africa on a global stage. And maybe in India people will know our cricket players, but the very cricket players of other races, such as J.P. Dumini, Vernon Philander, Kagiso Rabada, Lungin Gidi, Hasim Amla, all of these players, despite now showing to the international platforms their undoubted talents, they would never have had an opportunity to represent their country had apartheid still be around. So there were a number of benefits that the new order, the democratic order that was brought to South Africa in 1994, has basically allowed us to do. We can now go to any school. We can go to any university. We can go to any clinic, to any hospital. We can visit any beach, or we can visit the beaches were even segregated. So all of these have now changed. But what has not changed is that we have not leveled the playing fields. We have not sufficiently and succinctly addressed or redressed the past. The past is still very much with us. And in many people's eyes, government is not playing its full role. But obviously, sometimes it's easy for us as outsiders to say that. But their hands are tied. They are not working in isolation. They are working in a global order, and doing anything internally will obviously project externally, and people will basically reinterpret that in another guise to say that the white people are now being oppressed. And what we found in the farmers, or some of the farmers, they are not all farmers, but that little 49 people that left for America, they went there complaining how they were being subjected to oppression here in South Africa, which was quite laughable. But nevertheless, President Trump welcomed them with open arms. I'm not going to delve into that, but just to say that there's still much work to be done. The example that I use is just to say that government is under pressure internally, but just as much as externally. So much needs to be done. South Africa is not where it should be and where it needs to be. Redress needs to emanate. Better distribution of the natural wealth of the country needs to emanate. And I think we basically also, we did it well, but we are racing against time and frustration, and the legacy of the past is basically going to catch up with us. So we have to basically use undue speed. That basically is my presentation. And I want to once again thank you for listening so diligently, and for the opportunity once again that you have afforded me to do my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Sedick Chrombe, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you for accepting this invitation and coming all the way and presenting it. And I could see the kind of work that you have done to make these things very much well organized. It was with a great interest that I've been watching you. The work that you're referring to that has been taken for a serious study in our university, 2-3 scholars actually working on that particular writing. I'm just exploring the possibility of introducing lived experiences, how lived experiences actually getting translated into our classes. We need to go beyond the theories, because theories are not enough to understand the pain and the suffering that has been inflicted upon us. So we got to go beyond the theories to post theory to understand this reality of existence. How do you react to it, sir, please?
Yeah. Firstly, I'm honest honored that some of your students have seen any value in the publication, and thanks to you as well for that on your institution. But I think you alluded correctly. I think it is easy for us to continuously say, to analyze where the problems stem from. But I think it is also necessary for those that have experienced and whose lives continue to be influenced by that, to basically allow for that theoretical context and perspective to get some legs. And what I mean, get some legs, it needs to be a personal rendition of how that context and how that framework basically impacted on the lives and how that continue to impact and how that relates to modern times. Through that, it can be a learning exercise. That's why I said, for instance, that the legacy of the past basically informs our present. In South Africa, I mentioned about the distribution of wealth. It is still very much prevalent, and it will continue to influence our future as a country and as a society. And if we don't learn from the lived experiences of the individuals and the communities that have basically, and the one thing that I constantly like as a refrain, somebody that has not actually experienced or influenced that system cannot sit in judgment of the experiences of somebody else. And that's why sometimes we have narrators, we have writers that basically talks about the experiences of others. We should talk about our own experiences, and that is what I would use as an answer for post theory. We must move beyond that.
Do you suggest that nothing about us without us?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do,
And the ex
do,
and the quotation which I used, and I like to use that as well. Chinua Achebe is an African writer, sociologist, where he says, until the lions write their own stories, the hunt will continue to basically credit the hunter, because the hunter writes the story. The lion must write the story too, and we are the lions. We are being hunted by the hunters, and we need to write it ourselves.
Yeah, one more reflection, sir. So, Truth and
Yes.
Reconciliation Commission that has been established soon after apartheid came to an end in South Africa recorded the witness statements, testimonials from several sources and several people. I understand that many people subjugated to this kind of suffering, they couldn't stand up before the commission to the witnesses, I know. And were very few people, in absence of many, very few people came and stood before the commission to bear the witnesses. And those witnesses recorded becoming a part of culture memory. That's one thing. There are several cases wherein such reporting did not take place, because the person who experienced that suffering, he has no language, he has no vocabulary, because the language is actually a colonial legacy, because it's difficult to formulate what happened to me and present it to you. So now that particular report running into thousands of pages becoming raw materials for several writers. So I want you to please check and then let me know how far such reportings close to truth. Are they actually really truth reports, or are there lots of fictions getting into that? What's your reflection on it from your own perspective, sir?
I think I'll touch on the last point first when you talk about language. And I always use the context of language is a most disempowering tool. And you are correct, where people cannot basically um, verbalize their suffering. They cannot possibly verbalize their understanding of what transpired to them. And then also, sometimes the language are being laundered, the language are being sanitized. And that's why I said we need to write our own stories so that we can basically say it as it has happened to, as it occurred to us. Instead of a narrator saying, no, I should rather use that. That's why language is the most disempowering tool. A person would like to project his full um, experience, but he doesn't have the words. But academics and intellectuals like us that have family and friends, or who have personally experienced this, we should do it ourselves. And it has taken me long to come to that realization, because I always had this in the back of my mind. And maybe it was a cultural context as well. Are people going to read? Are they going to be benefit? Is it going to be valuable before I started to write? And I think despite the fact that sometimes we might not have the terminologies and the language to say what we want to say, we should continue at it. And we should bounce it off our peers. And our peers will be able to assist in that respect. Coming back to your first context about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, what I found, the one weakness that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had was that the principle of volunteerism, that those perpetrators that did vile deeds, that they voluntarily come to the commission and present what they have done. Now, where in the world would you find that somebody? But I think it was a lot to do with the Mandela-esque culture at the time, that we must reconcile. And if you look at what it says, truth and reconciliation, it's mostly about reconciliation. Let's forget the past. Let's move on into a new. But you cannot move on until you have dealt with your past. And the past is still lingering with us.
Thank you, sir, for this engaging session. As we move towards the end of our session, today we witnessed an information ceremony that will undoubtedly value to each of our professional and personal lives. Great moments are born from great appreciation. I would like to call Mr. Sindhujo, Assistant Professor of English, to deliver the vote of thanks.
I feel immense pleasure in proposing the vote of thanks. First, I thank the Almighty for being blessed with the gift of intelligence and knowledge and being in the midst of scholars. Secondly, I am honored to thank our respected chairman for providing us a wonderful platform and opportunities without which this conference would always be a dream. Next, I thank our secretary, Dr. Narayana Rajan sir, for his guidance and motivation. Next, I would like to thank our beloved principal madam, Dr. M. Jhansi Rani, for being the backbone and her constant support make us to achieve to go on a long way. Next, I am deeply indebted to our resource person, Dr. Tamimul Ansari sir, for his inspiring speech on Global South, which rejects the old binaries of West-East and how this transition help others to move from cultural and traditional themes to global modernities. Next, I am honored to thank our keynote speaker, Mr. Sedick Chrombe, an alumnus, University of Western Cape, writer and author of My Apartheid Diary. The untold stories will remain untold unless our research community has started research on the way you people have suffered. Our researcher will surely take this into different level of African American literature. Thank you, sir. Next, I am honored to thank our chairpersons, Dr. Vasigi Madam, Associate Professor, Department of English, MS University. Next, Dr. Kavita, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Aditanar College of Arts and Science, Tiruchendur. Then Dr. Kausalya Madam, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Vavu Vajiga Women's College, Koilpatnam. Next, Dr. Venkat Subramanian, Principal, Loba Metric Higher Secondary School, ARL, for chairing our presentation session and make the discussion lively and informative. Next, I am pleased to thank our lovable HOD and the conveners of this program, my department colleagues, for their strenuous effort to make this conference a successful one. Next, I thank all our scholars and participants of different colleges and universities as their thoughts and ideas on our themes explored many unexplored areas. Last but not least, I thank our student participants by whom I believe the conference is always a memorable and our students have a lot of takeaway from the conference with which would be a landmark in their research work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crombie, for being with us, assisting us, helping us, in our academic journey, and we truly appreciate all the inputs that you have given, the efforts that you have taken. Because all time, whenever I invite you for any presentations, you'd be willing to help me out with this. Thanks a lot. Thank you from my side, sir.
I think
You'll
just
continue to
from
be
my side,
patient.
yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ansari, and to the rest of the platform. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for affording me this platform. And I hope that I have indicated the confidence that you have instilled in me. And it has been an absolute pleasure. And I also am honored and grateful for that which you have extended to me through the invitation. I hope everything goes well in your future endeavors. And I also hope that everything goes well for the rest of the academic year. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you. See all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.